The music at Bad Chad Customs wasn't meant to have sirens in it. People in Newfoundland have known for years that Chad hilts could turn scrap metal into rolling art while sparks flew and cutters screamed. That sound, though, was replaced by something much scarier just 1 minute ago. Hearing the sound of emergency vehicles pulling into the parking lot. The red and blue lights of the cars bounced off the store windows. No one thought that the police would be there. No. There was no statement or warning, just inspectors and police officers in plain clothes walking into a place that fans thought they knew. People were told to take a step back. The cameras turned off. Phones were taken away. The shop floor was quiet for the first time since the show started. Something had caused a review that wasn't usually done. Something so important that the authorities wouldn't say what they were looking for. They knew where to go, though. As they walked, they passed the public work areas and the familiar builds that fans had seen on TV. Then, they stopped in front of a part of the shop that almost no one had since opened. A heavy metal door that was hidden by tool racks and parts bins was quickly seen. Behind it was an office that had never been shown on TV. A locked room that Chad had. The air inside felt different when the door opened. Chemically thick, old, and heavy in a way that shouldn't be in a garage. Police took a moment to think before they stepped in. One of them put his hand over his mouth. Someone else reached for a flashlight. What was in there wasn't just strange, it was wrong. Quickly, word got around the building that something in that room had changed the whole mood of the inspection. Workers talked quietly. The people who were making the movie were told to stop. Chad was also taken away from the cameras that had been following him for years. The man known for metal thieves who broke the rules had to answer for something much worse all of a sudden. Outside, people watched as more cars pulled up. The truth was hidden behind a door that should never have been opened. The secret that was kept in that room wasn't just about cars either. It was about how Chad had been making things worse when no one was looking. There was one thing that everyone knew about Chad Hiltz before the sounds, the locked door, and the silence. No respect. No one else would have built cars the way he did. There are no plans, no corporate sponsors, and no polished showroom perfection. There is only raw steel, instinct, and a failure to follow anyone's rules. His fans loved him for it. Some people told him not to do it. The image Chad had for years was like armor around him. We're more than just a shop at Bad Chad Customs. It was a movement of protest on wheels. Chad didn't believe in the rules of his field. He had faith in vision. He built things that seemed crazy but felt right. It would be even better if the style didn't follow the rules. His attitude made him well known. But it put him in direct conflict with rules, inspectors, and people who valued paperwork over art. People who worked there say that Chad hated it when people got in his way. He had more faith in himself than in any inspector, any code book, or any method. That's where everything began to become risky. The shop changed as the show did. It's more important than ever to move faster and bigger with more money and plans. Chad didn't slow down to add organization, though. He swore even more silence. People began projects that were never talked about. Things arrived late at night. Some parts of the shop were quietly made less accessible, and one area was made completely off limits. People thought the locked room was storage or maybe a secret place to make things normal, something dull. No one ever thought it would be something that would make inspectors run with flashlights and sealed bags of evidence. But Chad knew. That's why his face changed when the police walked right past every building they could see and went straight for that door. It wasn't about having papers. He had been keeping something from you. For a man who made a name for himself by breaking the law, there's always one. You promise you'll never cross that line. What was behind the door could have been the moment Chad walked through it. At Bad Chad Customs, no one brought up the space behind the racks. It wasn't caught on camera. It wasn't talked about in build meetings. No one even said anything about it when new employees were shown around the shop. Nothing but steel pipe stacks, old fenders, and storage shelves that looked like they were just there to take up space. But everyone knew that you didn't move those boxes. You didn't ask them what they were doing. You also didn't try to open the door, because that was only Chad's. People who used to work there say that the light would sometimes stay on behind that wall late at night, after shooting was over and the shop was empty. Sounds of grinding, flashes of welding, and the smell of chemicals moving into the main room. Chad was always working on something, but he was never in front of a camera or with other people. He would brush it off when asked about it. Just private work, nothing else. But when the officials came, they didn't look around. They didn't ask which bay to begin in. It was like someone told them exactly where to look, because they went straight to that secret door. Even the experienced cops stopped when they pushed it open. It wasn't just another work area inside. It was. The way it was put together wasn't like the way Chad usually builds, which is a mess. Workbenches were lined with cases that had names on them. Parts were put into a list. The tools were carefully put together. There were projects in different stages of being put together. Some were only the frames, while others were only half covered, like someone had left them in the middle of being built. The tags came next. Not all of the parts had ID numbers. There were no identifying marks on some frames. What was written down didn't match what was on the floor. This was more than just creativity. The goal was to hide. That thing Chad was working on in that room wasn't supposed to be in the show or be found. The thing he had been hiding for years was finally shown to everyone as he stood under the bright inspection lights. Bad Chad wasn't in trouble for what brought inspectors to his door. It was a problem report. A regular report from a nearby business about the smell of chemicals in the air late at night. There were paint fumes, acids, and other strong smells that shouldn't have come from a legal custom shop. It seemed like a fire safety problem at first. Something that is quickly written down and gone over. But when the shop looked through state records, they found something that didn't seem right. There were things in Chad's purchase history that weren't meant to be there. Industrial solvents, custom coatings, and limited resins that are used in dangerous fabrication, the kind of work you'd only see in a big factory, not a small custom shop in Newfoundland. The second red flag then flew. What the shop was allowed to use didn't match the equipment that was listed with bad Chad customs. Some machines were never checked out. Some didn't have any licenses at all. Others were meant to be taken out of service years ago. From then on, the visit wasn't the same. When the inspectors got there, they didn't just look at the fire extinguishers. They were looking for something that wasn't meant to be there, making sure that rules were followed, and keeping track of materials. And it was clear right away when they walked inside. It looked like the main store was a mess, loud, and crazy. Just what fans were hoping for. But the room that was hidden told a different story. There was careful work in this story. Process of building things in secret, away from cameras and rules. The inspectors were no longer talking about fumes when they left that locked room with evidence bags in their hands. They were talking about breaking the law. Important ones. Chad Hiltz was no longer just a rogue builder. There was a man in the middle of something that could stop everything. The tone changed as soon as the inspectors went all the way into the secret room. The area wasn't just for one person. It was a planned action. Jars with sharp black ink marks were lined up along the workbenches. Some had machining tools in them. Others had chemical substances that were strong enough to be used to strip, bond, and harden metal. These weren't materials for a beginner. They were the kind that are used in dangerous manufacturing, the kind that needs permits, ventilation systems, and strict safety rules. The real shock came when they got to the frames. A number of partly put together vehicle chassis were lying in the back of the room under tarps. When inspectors pulled them back, they found something that made them stop right there. There are no VIN plates, license tags, or other ways to track where the car came from. These were not repairs. These were raw, unlisted frames, the kind that are required by law to be recorded as soon as they are made. Some looked like they had been changed, soldered, cut, and put back together more than once. Some had parts that were ground smooth on purpose, making it look like something had been taken away. There were stacks of papers nearby that didn't match the bills on the floor. There were bills for parts that weren't in the public shop, titles for cars that no one had ever seen on camera, and serial numbers that didn't match anything in the official databases. No longer was this just making custom cars. It was production that wasn't recorded. At that point, officials knew what they were seeing wasn't a mistake or an oversight. It was done on purpose. Outside the system, someone had been making cars. There is no responsibility, no oversight, and no records. And all of those secret frames led to the same person, Chad Hiltz. Bad Chad's shop was no longer just a place where crazy ideas came to life by the time the first evidence boxes were closed. It was now the focus of a probe. The more detectives dug, the more they found the same truth. Every piece of paper, every frame that isn't seen, and every unknown part. All of them said the same name, Chad. There was more than just paper in the room that made it quiet. That's what it was. The builds in the secret room were not picked at random. They stuck to a theme. Frames that are stripped down and light are made for speed and strength, not for safety or legality. There were some with stronger roll bars that didn't meet the standards for street use. Some people had suspension systems built for things that were much more extreme than anything fans had ever seen on the show. It wasn't about making cool cars. It was about making tools that were used for something no one knew about. A police officer ran their hand along a welded joint and frowned. Chad didn't usually dress in such a crazy, disorganized way. This was figured out, tested. Almost like a professional. Someone in this room had been working hard, not creatively. That brought up the scariest question of all. Who was making this if Chad was known for making loud, risky art? Chad sat outside the room by himself and watched the shop. The thing he had spent his whole life on slowly changed into something he couldn't recognize. He could feel it going down. What people say about Bad Chad, its history, and its myths. When they finally came back to ask him, he didn't say that the room wasn't there. He didn't say no to the plans. But when they asked him why none of it was written down, his answer scared them. It's not always good to draw attention to things. And everyone knew the same thing at that moment. That thing that was being built back there wasn't for TV. It had to do with something Chad had never been ready to say. The longer the